I've pretty much kept every single notebook from high school and university. They've stayed with me across moves, different seasons of life. But now, as I become more minimalist, I'm finally letting go. But before I do, I want to reflect on what all this work actually has meant for me. What did all this work actually do for my life? Even though I did graduate with a first class honours in law, I've seen firsthand how we all chase success, grades, degrees, achievements. But years later, when you look back at all these notebooks, these lifeless pages, and you look at the sacrifices, what does this all add up to? Maybe you can reflect on what all your work has actually added up to and what does it mean for you today. Mimawa Kwaba, I welcome you back to my channel. I'm Ajwa, known also as Ajwa A in Ghana, and this is my corner of the world, and you are welcome. I have become very minimalistic, more and more so over the years, and I have these piles of books from high school and university that really represent the years and years of work. What this says for me about success, achievement, minimalism, maybe you also might want to go back and look at the work that you've put into your own notebooks and things like that. A little bit of context is that for a large portion of middle school into high school, I became a straight A student. And that continued into high school, where I continued to get really great grades. And at 16, I started thinking about a career in law. And so that course that I wanted to do was quite competitive. I was able to get into the course that I wanted to get into, which was law. And I also studied two other degrees, international studies and applied leadership and critical thinking. I went on to study these courses at university, these degrees, for 5 years in total. And it was a very consistent, intensive period of my life where I did find a lot of purpose and fulfillment and identity in being academic and diligent. I graduated at the end of my courses with a first class honours and was awarded the University Medal, a top student in my entire cohort. I wanted to just speak about where my personal ethic of diligence came from. I think that this work ethic began when I started to see that putting in those hours to study for a test actually led to, for me, results. And in life, I think when there are certain things that you can't control, you do latch onto the things that you can control. And I was seeing that my study routines, which often involved after school, doing my readings, answering questions, preparing for classes, researching for assessments, led to me getting really excellent grades, going the extra mile. Something I also would consistently do is look at the marking criteria. And if I would see that a high distinction would require at least citing 5 different sources, I would have maybe 8 sources or 10 sources. Early 20s, when I had entered university, I became more aware of the cultural pressures that exist within different cultures. There is pressure socially for you to do really well and to get into a career that is really prestigious. And I think me deciding to become a lawyer, which I personally definitely wanted to pursue, it also was convenient that it fit within one of those categories of jobs that was well respected within my cultural circles. We're also becoming aware that going above and beyond doesn't necessarily directly correlate to achieving that success and those results that you would typically expect. When you leave high school and you become of age, you become responsible for adult things, you then need to navigate a world where you can't necessarily control the outcomes. What is the point of being a high achiever? For me, the internal costs throughout my education that all this work in these notebooks represents: all-nighters, pressure from myself, saying no to social engagements, or just being very selective. Honestly, to me, that was worth it. Out to the point of inspiration for this video, and that is letting go of all of these books and notes that I've kept over the years. I might keep some of them, but like I mentioned, over the years, I've become more and more minimalistic. And it's just this desire to want to feel lighter and not held down by things. I think that even these books, while they have helped me in a lot of ways today, I think all the sacrifice and discipline that they represent, those are qualities that are going to carry through, and they've carried me through to this point. But having these books here also is a constant reminder of a past life that I lived, or past lives that I've lived. And in the past, that academic success, that high achieving, did lead to, in some ways, an unhealthy identity that I built on the approval of others, on getting these metrics of success that didn't necessarily mean the world to me, but they meant the world to the world. And to me, that was important to be able to survive in the world. The good, I'm going to take that with me, but I'm going to leave the rest. And so I think that physically letting go of items that remind you of the past can in some ways be really good, so that you can step into what you've now learned from all of that. Because at the end of the day, yes, I was a first class honors graduate. Yes, I was a university medalist. Yes, I did receive a lot of high distinctions. I placed first in law subjects. I graduated as one of the top students in my entire law school cohort. But now, like, I can't be holding on to just that. I've now discovered so many other things, or unearthed so many things that I had neglected: my creative sides and my love of travel and moving to different places. And to do that, I don't need stuff. Like, that's just going to weigh me down. Also, the important thing in that is knowledge versus wisdom. Knowledge being, that's the substance, that's the content, but the wisdom is actually how you've taken the substance and content and actually made sense of it. How have you critically thought about it? How have you actually now used that content and substance to do something meaningful for yourself in your own life? And so for me, just having these books here, seeing them does remind me of all the hard work and does remind me of the journey to get here. But at the end of the day, those books are not going to help me necessarily achieve what I now need to do. At this point, like, for you, what did you take from your school years? I'd love to hear what school really taught you and what you've taken from that period. To anyone watching who finds themselves maybe in that similar situation of going through a vigorous course, or you're getting through a training program, or you're in a period of life where you're really acquiring that knowledge and getting ready to apply that in through wisdom in the next steps that you take. The younger that you are, it's true that making those sacrifices early, you never regret applying yourself. Like I said before, I don't regret the sacrifices that I needed to make. And yes, maybe in a way that they're not sacrifices, they're just necessary steps that you need to take to get where you need to go. And in that respect, it can be uncomfortable, and it's not going to be a path that everyone wants to take. And, in some instances, it might not be a path everyone needs to take, because there are other ways. But I think that for me, hard work never hurts, diligence never hurts. And building that consistency is going to stay with you. And when maybe you're going through challenges later on, it's those principles that you've learned through those challenging seasons to pick yourself back up, to keep going even when it gets hard, that are going to help you break through those hard down times. Going above and beyond you don't see the results straight away like you think you will once you graduate high school. Now, though, that hard work and going above and beyond has really paid dividends later on. And I hope that this little reflection has given you some Points to ponder about why we keep the things that we do. Take a moment to celebrate coming through these challenging years, and I'd love to hear more about your journey below. And you can expect more cultural analysis and reflective kind of videos and commentary videos. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one. The audio is going to be a bit patchy because I'm not using the microphone, but this looked like some prep for a assessment task, and I was really thorough in terms of looking at what the marking criteria was and like writing everything that I would need to include to get a HD. And as you can see, I've like obviously had my own color coding method. This was toward the start of uni. It even has that like old paper smell. Like I mentioned, I studied, it was a Bachelor of Applied Leadership and Critical Thinking, and one of the units I did was called Introduction to Critical Thinking. This was a speech that I selected to analyze. Wow. This is really a throwback. So the area of law I ended up wanting to specialize in was criminal defense. And one of the very first subjects that I did in law school was criminal law. And I've just found an assessment where I remember I found it probably quite challenging because it was the first time I was studying law at a university level after just studying legal studies in high school. And it looks like in this assessment, I got a credit with some distinction elements. And it was interesting because later on in law school, I really found my rhythm and was able to consistently get distinctions and high distinctions. I started off this, it must have been we had to identify the elements of an offense and then perhaps make a conclusion about whether the elements were made out. Must have been like an in-class activity, and we were given so many minutes or so to do that. This was an essay, it looks like, and I got a distinction for this one. The opening paragraph reads, Roach and McAnlew, they were, I believe, the textbook authors, provide a dynamic argument when one examines the argument in relation to the Campbelltown local court as depicted in the ABC documentary So Help Me God. Roach and Mack provide three distinct ideas which support their thesis. In achieving justice in the local court, the magistrate plays a significant role. Hence, the procedural pressures affecting the magistrate call into question the achievement of such justice. The ideas that will be discussed include judgecraft, judicial demeanour, and in-court judicial behaviour in relation to legitimacy. Thus, it can be said that Roach and McAnlew's ideas and argument are supported and challenged through the documentary So Help Me God. It is evident that the magistrate is instrumental in the achievement of justice, and thus pressures on the magistrate must be considered when judging whether outcomes in the lower courts are fair and legitimate. Interesting. So I think that was definitely an access to justice kind of question, and looking at what justice is and the role of the judiciary in that. There was some open book exams for those subjects, some closed book exams. This is from Tort Law. I don't know whether this was an open or closed book exam, but clearly there was a lot to remember and understand. Different sections of legislation, you know, hear about some kind of section 5H, no proactive duty to warn of obvious risk. So this is interesting about duty of care, negligence, liability, injured persons presumed to be aware of obvious risks, section 5GH. So obviously we needed to use the legislation to interpret facts, problem scenarios we were given. Meaning of obvious risk, definitions are very important within law, and how those definitions are defined in the legislation, and then also how that those definitions have been interpreted by the courts in case law. And these were all quite interesting skills to develop in law school and a really particular way of getting you to think. And yeah, it's just really going through memory lane with this. I would practice exam short answers. I wrote for one of the responses, the development of the British parliamentary system involved much war and bloodshed according to Cook and others, in brackets 2015. That always was a winning approach, citations within your answers. Practice makes perfect. I did distance education in high school because I did advanced English and my high school had standard English only. And so I would get these tasks and I would basically do all my learning through these packages that would come delivered to my school, and then that would give me my content to work on for the term. And I had a mid-course report in year 12, final year of high school, and I was ranked number 9 out of 24 students. The comment that I got in this mid-year report, mid-course report, was Adjoa has worked extremely well this semester. Her responses, this is English as we identified, are insightful and display perceptive understanding of concepts within both written and speaking tasks. She communicates frequently and always displays a positive attitude. Her answers are clear and expressive, but at times she can lose focus in her longer responses. Adjoa writes with a strong and interesting personal voice in all situations. Adjoa is to be commended on her results in English, which reflect her level of involvement. Adjoa is a pleasure to teach, and I'm sure will continue to excel in her studies with her mature attitude and her well above average ability. I remember in English, something I did kind of find a bit tricky as I progressed in high school was imaginative writing. So it looked like we had this reading and writing task, and we were to write a piece of imaginative writing that explored the concept of discovery. I got an 8 out of 10. And it's so interesting because I had never been to New York in my life prior to 2024. And the way that my story starts off is walking through downtown Harlem. The black of the night cannot sweep my existence up into it, as it appears that I am being made a spectacle of. Why, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. That night I was walking through downtown Harlem, exposed to the streets and their alleyways. I'm so confused right now. I got an 8 out of 10 for that, so. I also had some essays for ancient history. I received a 14 out of 15. And for modern history, I received a 13.5 out of 15. So A's. This was some kind of source task. I remember I went through, I would like bind my assessment tasks and like make a really professional cover page. So it's kind of nice to look back on all of this, you know. I love my ancient history teacher because I'm looking at her comments on my assessments, and she would say things like, I'm so proud of you, I'm so proud of your effort, and you thoroughly deserve this outstanding result. Your thesis statement is excellently worded. And these were the skills that became really essential as a humanities and arts student at university. And even now, thesis, how do you come up with a critical question? How do you research? How do you engage with different perspectives? All high school, it started off, and you might be doing it at a very basic level then, but that is what you use to build upon. So my teachers were really right, and locking in really did help post high school.